this podcast, Ron Rubico from Pointillist discuss customer journey analytics and why it's relevant for a business and what a business could do to stay competitive. So, stay tuned. So, welcome everyone to another episode of Future of Data podcast. Today we have a very, very special guest, and I think today is one of the interesting days. So I have a personal bio on the person we're talking to, and I have a professional bio. So I'll quickly go through the professional, and then I'll slightly get into the personal stuff, and then we'll start this conversation. So Ron is the CEO and co-founder of Pointillist, a Boston-based customer journey analytics company. Prior to Pointillist, he was a GM, a general manager of the consumer analytics division of Altisource, a $1 billion financial technology firm, and also CEO and co-founder of Foliage, an award-winning software company, which grew to be one of the 10 largest in Massachusetts. He continues to serve on board member, investor, and advisory level on successful startups in the analytics space, and is an active speaker and mentor in Boston early stage venture community. He earned a BE from Dartmouth College and BA in chemistry from Skidmore College. And on a personal level, like, he has been our advisor. Like, so whenever I think, and whenever I have any, we need to ask anything, he is always available to the Boston community folks. So, Ron, thank you so much for all you're doing to the community in Boston and to the people in analytics. I think much appreciate that. And before I give it to you, I also want to congratulate. I think I recently read an article about most likable CEOs in Boston, and I think you made into that list. So definitely want to learn your secret sauce as much as possible. And again, thank you so much for stepping up and sharing your insights with our community.
Yeah, well, thank you as well, Vishal, and appreciate everything that you do in Boston as well. You've also given me and our company a forum over the past couple of years to speak out to the community, and you're just really happy to be here today and be part of what you're doing, not only here but across the country.
Thank you. So let's talk about your journey. Like, what made you into the and you have been successful. What had brought you into the world of analytics? What are some of the things that you observed that pretty much others failed, or they didn't see it as clearly? And what are some of the, if you can just walk us through your journey?
Yeah, sure. Well, my journey has been a long one, a lot longer than a lot of the youthful companies here in Boston. So I'm gonna edit it down significantly. But I started out in software in the '80s, believe it or not, and built a software company, and everything was much more primitive then, and yet it was still just incredibly exciting. What we were going through, software was still exotic. We were able to build a pretty good sized company and sell that. And then I spent some years in the Boston, DC community, really just trying to see what other people were doing after spending so much time in my own company. And that was a great opportunity and education for me. The Boston DC community, as you know, super smart, so much going on here in Boston with young growth companies. I thought I was going to go in and be able to mentor, and that helped out. That did happen, but what I've learned from a lot of these young CEOs along the way that was incredible for me. And really, while I had worked with analytics in a software context for many years, my initial focus when I got into that community was the clean tech space. I was really focused on trying to kind of, quote, give back a little bit, and very enamored of that space. And I quickly learned that the clean tech space most frequently takes a lot of capital, a lot more capital than I had. But where I was able to fit was to really some of these young analytics companies, some of which I'm on the board on or advisor to now, and really that are making a massive difference in that market by just approaching it more intelligently, more quantitatively, to really bring new efficiencies and great new ideas to the market. So that really turned me, sort of from more of a clean tech focus over to just a largely analytics focus. And then ultimately, I expected to catch on with one of these companies at some point. And my kids had just gone off to school, and my wife thought it was time that I got a job again. So I was highly motivated. And I came across this opportunity at this large fintech company, Altisource, a $1 billion company, and they're part of a group of 5 related companies, public companies, very entrepreneurial spirit, and they had global analytics teams, and their growth was creating a lot of challenges for them. And so, in my discussions with the board and the executive team, they laid out an opportunity for me to come in and help them. Sort of equip them for the challenges that they were facing in the analytics teams and analytics needs across the globe, but at the same time to be able to leverage their sort of worldwide technology footprint and the analytics teams to look for market opportunities, because that's what, as I said, they've been very entrepreneurial in the past. And out of that grew basically the idea and the need for Pointillist. We looked around the market quite a bit for solutions to our own problems. We had call centers with tens of thousands of people across the globe, serving millions of people, and the ability for us to be able to get at and really understand the customer experience, the journeys on which those customers' experiences depend, and then to be able to importantly act on those was just a Herculean task, and we just felt like we can't be the only ones. We didn't set out to build a product. We set out to solve a problem, and so that was really the genesis behind Pointillist. Brought in some startup people that from my background in the past, and spent the next couple of years trying to really focus on this problem and basically bring a product to market that really shifts the whole approach in a way that that makes it practical for large organizations with tens of thousands or hundreds of millions of customers to really get at the root cause of those experiences, those journeys, to quantify them and to be able to act on them. So
interesting.
Even my edited story is long, Vishal. So.
That is fascinating, Pran, by the way. And I think from what I know, I think so. First, out of curiosity, who came up with the word Pointillist?
Well, I have to give credit where credit is due, and we work closely with the global marketing team here at Altisource, and we had looked at quite a few names beforehand that represented what we do, and someone on that team came up with that, and as soon as I heard it, I knew it was perfect, right? Because for those, I'm sure that many of your listeners probably aren't aware of pointillism. It's a little bit obscure, but it comes from a 19th century movement in the French Impressionist painting movement. And basically what it does is it takes Impressionism and extends it to painting beautiful paintings with dots, with paints, with just dots. And when you get close to the pictures, really it looks like 10,000 dots on a canvas. But as you pull back to see the big picture, as it were, it reveals itself, and it reveals itself in ways that are unpredictable and beautiful. And that's really how we think about Pointillist, revealing that big picture by having access to the real quantitative data that underlies it, and then being able to take action on it and create something beautiful for our customers and their customers as well.
Interesting. I think that's very innovative. I think that's I do really I've heard any company name that's so apt in sort of defining what they do, and in a very sort of very beautiful way. So I think definitely good job there from the global marketing team from Antel.
And if they had chosen any other period in history or maybe any other art form, I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have been hard pressed to identify it. But I remember it. I have to shout out thanks to my 8th grade French teacher who made me do a presentation on French impressionism and pointillism. So it came in handy many years later.
So now let's talk about its origin, right? So I know that I think from last when we connected in one of the events in Boston, so we were discussing about how it was your inside need for Altisource. Then you realized it, and even in your pitch now, you briefly mentioned about, you said, oh no, if we are seeing this pain, others must be seeing it too, and then probably we can serve them. So what was that moment when you realized, hey, maybe this could solve a bigger pain than just for the Altisource or something? If you can shed some light on that era or that time when sort of you were just thought, hey, maybe it's a company that could come out.
Well, I mean, the first moment of recognition that this was a problem, we were trying to solve actually a fairly what should be a straightforward problem, which is our customers were largely large enterprises in the mortgage space at the time, and lots of, as you probably recall, in 2007, 8, and 9, lots of turmoil in that market, lots of customers and mortgage holders in pain, in need, needed personal, not only personal service, but very personalized sort of analytics that apply to their cases to be able to help them to revise their mortgages and to help them out of whatever situation they're in. And this was creating a crushing situation for companies that were trying to serve that market on the servicing side. And so one of the basic cases was really just trying to understand through all the channels through which customers were communicating, to be able to weave those together in a way to be able to understand what's happening on the web versus what's happening in the call center versus what's happening online, mobile applications. And so my analytics team was growing massively, and data science team, to be able to cope with that problem, because being able to understand those and weave together those journeys as they are across those channels was critical to us. We needed to understand what happened to this particular person over the last few months, over the last couple of years, across different channels. Those journeys don't just happen all on the web or just all in the call center or in the customer support center. They need to be integrated to be understood, and this is what our customers were demanding, not only from a cost basis, but from an ability to resolve the problems for the customers. And it turned out that that was a largely insoluble problem, simply because the data is stored throughout the organization. It's in silos, technology silos, departmental silos, and we were spending just a ton of time trying to bring the data together in a place to make it accessible, to match identities across all those different data sources, and then really to understand in a way that was usable and in a cost and a time frame that was practical, how we could take advantage of that to provide that better service. And by the way, this is a highly regulated space, so we were trying to do that for our customers, but the government and the various agencies were very, very interested in us getting that right. So it was a problem across the board for us, huge problem.
Interesting, and thank you for shedding light on that. So I think one thing that I read about Pointillist and your focus was in customer journey analytics. I think that's the problem that you're trying to solve. So to our audience, if you can shed some light on what is customer journey analytics, that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can jump off of that last discussion we just had. It's really to be able to understand the customer experience and to be able to act on that customer experience. And And this is a very hot topic, obviously not just in the financial technology space, but across the board. As consumers, we have more choice than ever, right? We're just incredibly mobile in terms of our ability to switch affinity from brand to brand, especially as new, more customer-focused opportunities come into the market. And companies, across the spectrum are being disrupted by new companies that come in and provide a superior experience. It's a key differentiator for many, many industries today, and it's only growing. And so journey analytics has become a very hot topic. And really, if you think about how enterprises have tried to provide better experience in the past, it has largely been around qualitative and pseudo-quantitative kinds of things like surveys and ethnographic research. And you come at it from many angles, and it's usually rolled up into kind of a universal score, like a Net Promoter Score, an NPS, or a CSAT score, which are useful and valuable to sort of grade where you are on a spectrum and at a very general level how your customers are feeling about you and how they're feeling about their experience with you. Really, where those metrics fall short, though, is the ability to take action on them. In particular, to be able to identify those areas where customers are running into obstacles or having a bad experience, versus those areas that things are really great. And so you start to get some insight into that through surveys. But the interactions between companies and customers today is so complex and across so many dimensions and channels that to really be able to understand which levers are available to you as an organization to pinpoint the areas which represent the most significant problems or the most significant opportunities, and then to be able to quantify them and act on them in a way that you are able to prioritize. Then you're able to then you've taken this somewhat vague metric and turned it into something actionable. And that's really what journey analytics is about. It's to be able to understand the customer actions and interactions that are behind those scores, those high-level scores that are behind those surveys. And then to be able to correlate those directly to not only those metrics like NPS and CSAT, but to correlate them directly to metrics that companies and individuals are measured on every day in their job. How do these interactions sum up to impact my revenue? How do they sum up to impact my growth, my profitability? Or if I'm a marketer, how are my campaigns performing in a way that allow me to, across channels, that allow me to pull certain levels to really drive not only acquisition performance, but importantly in journey analytics, to keep customers and to identify the most valuable customers and to be able to make sure that you spend your marketing dollars wisely in that one particular dimension.
Interesting. So one thing I was wondering about that you have a good exposure on customer journey analytics and what sort of businesses do and what they don't do. So what are some of your thoughts on some of the rookie mistakes that businesses are doing that like if you talk to either your prospects or you talk to the industry folks or anyone around who's building up their customer analytics strategy or customer experience strategy, what are some of the mistakes that you see that it's more often than you want to see in the ecosystem?
Yeah, well, I want to be very careful about pointing out mistakes because I was looking to be a customer of this kind of technology first, and so it's an incredibly tough space to really get your arms around. Just getting a technology stack together to understand the customer experience. Traditionally, which is mostly in say the marketing technology space. It's a Herculean task today for marketers and customer experience teams to be able to assemble the technologies, keep up with them, understand where the market is moving, and come up with an integrated, meaningful approach. So I think of it less as rookie mistakes, and really more as I've got this large investment in these technologies. I need to understand how to bring them in a way together in a way that's really can meaningfully improve the metrics on which these companies are measured, and meaningfully improve the experiences and the outcomes for my customers. So it's less that people are running at it and making mistakes because they haven't thought through it, and in my opinion, more that they take a close look at it. And with traditional technologies, understand that I don't have a year or 2 years to develop a data warehouse or a data lake and a full strategy around bringing this data together. And maybe I don't have 7 figures to get a data science team on or a team of PhDs in analytics. This is just not practical for me today. So as often as not, what I find is that customers, our prospects, have just decided to put it off until it becomes a more practical pursuit. And really what that has led to is a lot of kind of decision making on gut instinct. And in terms of where to spend money to improve outcomes, to understand that cross-channel experience better, and where to more wisely spend marketing dollars. So people are grappling with a very real problem, and it's just over the last several years that technologies like Pointillist have come along that have started to solve some of the problems that have been the primary obstacles in the past.
Interesting. So I think thank you so much for shedding light on that. So I think one thing so during my small brief stint with customer experience, when I was working on a consulting firm, we saw one very common behavior, and I think you helped me understand that from your lens. So there was sort of something called transactional interactions and the relational interactions in a customer experience journey. So basically, if you buy something from Starbucks, that's a transactional interaction, right? So there was some intimacy. You delivered, you paid for something, you got an experience quickly, get done, you're out. But having done that for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, now that's a relational aspect to it, that how loyal you are to customer, sort of something like Starbucks and all that. And I think we more often than none, we used to see that businesses sometime confusing the relation from transactional aspects, like basically if you're happy now, probably you will be happy forever or something like. So they don't have a good relational strategy or long-term strategy, and they're focusing on the quick ones. And and there was NPS and all that. There's some sort of solution, as you rightly pointed out, to help them understand that some of those things, at least from the relational perspective. For something like having, say, Pointillist or a tool to understand their journey, how businesses could understand their sort of transactional or short-term journey vis-a-vis of the relational aspect. Like, do you have any insight on that? Because I think what we used to hear at that point was that since there are two different surveys, but they're both surveys, and I'm coming from the survey end, you could mix and match the two, and you can sort of confuse one from the other and do that. So we used to give them kind of a driver analysis at which particular service is driving which kind of behavior. From there on, they can do that. With tools, those things are relatively easier to sort of grasp. So from Pointillist's perspective or from the tool perspective, how do tool appreciate like these silos, if you can shed some light?
Yeah, sure. No, that's a great question, and it really cuts to the root of a lot of the challenges in this area. So one of the things that you said that was really important is that not all interactions are created equal. I mean, that's just true, right? There are some things that customers that are really meaningful for customers and enterprises to understand, and there are others that are less so. And it's even more nuanced than that, because for some particular situations, customers and contexts, certain transactions, certain interactions have much more importance than in other contexts, right? So just that statement should scare data scientists, right?
Right. Absolutely.
But it's the truth, right? That's one thing. And then the other truism from me is that you can have 99 great interactions in a row, and one really miserable one, and that can ruin the whole relationship, right? And that happens. That happens in sort of human relationships at large, and it certainly happens in our relationships with companies. And so those are really important transactions, even though they may be minor in a broader context, right? So separating the important from the trivial is a key feature of a journey analytics platform, and you have to do that in many different dimensions and contexts, right, to be useful, right? And that's one of the nuanced areas of the whole pursuit. So if you think about traditional tools that aren't able to do that, then let's back up even further. As individuals, we have journeys. You and I might both shop at Amazon. We shop for different things at different times over different time frames. Our journeys are different by definition. And if you multiply that by 100 million customers, you have 100 million macro journeys, and then many micro journeys when you're buying something or interacting with them at a different time. There is no simple answer to that question. And so you have to start to carve it up into the most meaningful areas. But what's critical there is to be able to separate the important from the trivial in the context of the view. So I think for journey analytics platforms, it's important, number one, to understand those behaviors and those interactions and those journeys that present the largest opportunity to improve customer outcomes. And you do that by sort of the top level process, top level down, of understanding what are the primary journeys that really drive the most important things to our organization and to our customers. And we're dealing with billions of data points usually here for large organizations. So you don't do that manually. So this is where analytics and machine learning have to come in as part of it. But before I digress too far down there, separating the important from the trivial, being able to understand and have dashboards and reports and analytics and capabilities to be able to arm executives with enough quantitative information to be able to know where to make, how to make their top level decisions. That's number one. But the flip side of that is that once you've identified those key opportunities or key obstacle areas, you need to be able to act on them, right? And acting, as difficult as it is to quantify those opportunities, acting is even more difficult because you can identify a big opportunity that impacts, say, 10 million customers, but then knowing just when and just how to engage with those customers at the right moment is another task in and of itself. And so, engagement to influence behaviors is the second piece of it. And in order to be a useful and practical tool for companies, you have to make this fast, and you have to make it easy enough and effective enough to quickly affect change. And you can't start with, it's going to take a year to bring the data together, or even a quarter. And you can't start with, you have to hire a dozen people to do this. You have to start with, this is going to be, very cheap. We're going to be able to start to make inroads into this understanding in weeks, if not days. And then there has to be a clear road to value within a very short period of time. And I will say, coming out, I'm an engineer by training. Coming out of the technology side, our whole business philosophy is an agile philosophy. And we when we work with our customers, we help to train them on how to bring an agile philosophy, get enough information together to make decisions that matter, get enough information together to act on those decisions, look for those wins so that you're getting those first wins in just a few weeks, and then build on that. So I probably answered way more than you asked. But
no, I think it's good. I think it's No, I think I totally agree with you. It's a big challenge, and I think you rightly pointed out having customer understand the micro and the macro journey. I think that's a good indicator to sort of figure out what's a long term. So I think that's well said on there. And one thing I think now I'm going slightly on the strategy behind Pointillist, and when you are sort of wearing that hat of representing that innovative company in talent in customer journey analytics space. So as you rightly pointed out, every business has different journey maps or different sort of aspect on how when what like every interaction is different. How you can build when you are sort of solving that problem of sketching a journey for any particular customer. How can you like what are some of the constraints that you work on when you're designing such tools so that businesses because every business is different that is interacting with you and their journey is different and your tool has to be relevant to multiple stories that these businesses represent. How do you sort of design such a capability or tool that can provide all this business? If you can shed some light on some of the insights and good practices there.
Yeah, so that's a great question because that's really was at the foundation of this. Our goal was to solve what we saw with two big problems. One, get the data together. Two, make it practical for analysis by the people that need it most, marketers and customer experience teams. And the first one, that's a legacy problem that won't go away. It's really hard to get this data together, and the traditional technologies are getting better. The creation of data warehouses, data lakes, still a big task. A lot of traditional thinking about it, but also some new ideas brought to that market. But one of the first thing you do when you think about bringing data together is what am I going to use this data for, right? And then that starts this process of, okay, I know I have to spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to use this data for, and based on that, I need to understand, put together a structure that's going to support that. And then that rolls back to where am I going to get this data from? What are the protocols? How does it vary? What's the velocity? These are all tough questions that a lot of smart people are working on. We took a slightly different approach to that. We said, we know what we're going to use this for. We're going to use it for one thing only, which is to understand customer journey and the customer experience. How does that simplify the problem for us? And it turns out that we've got some pretty clever guys on staff, some pretty clever people, a lot of women, in fact. It turns out that you can vastly simplify that problem by on the far end, knowing what the destination data format looks like. For us, it's just a massive time series database. That is a vast simplification because there are a lot of substructures inside which draw from graphing technologies. It's a NoSQL kind of database. There are relational aspects to it as well. But nevertheless, when we pour data into that, we take data in the form that you send it, and it's a vastly simplified process. So our promise to our customers, for example, is you sign a contract with us, we'll have data flowing into our platform within the next day, and then we'll be training you on your own data during the first several weeks. And that's a very different message than was traditionally sent from most technologies that were trying to solve this problem, which was we need to start by doing a lot of thinking first. It's not that thinking is not important as part of this, but you need to be able to prove that you can move fast and take iterative action. So changing the nature of the data discussion and the framework for how you think about integrating that data together made it a much more agile process for us to get data into the system. And as it turned out, that created a lot of benefits for us when we needed to then expose that data in a way that the non-technical among us, the people that are in marketing or customer experience, super smart people that are focused on the business and the customer and not so focused on the data payloads, how do they interact with this data in a way that very quickly they're able to understand those customer stories and act on them. So, one piece of the thinking was about, let's try to change the nature of the how we think about data and what problems that we're solving with it. And the second piece is, let's make sure that our stakeholders have access to all the information that's created, all the latent information that exists in those distributed data sources, without having to code, without having to know data science. So in our view, you need to be able to express that in the form of stories, the way that you and I would talk to each other about groups of our customers. We need to be able to expose that information to these customer experience teams and marketers as human stories, albeit with a strong quantitative foundation underpinning them. So on our platform, for example, what you view are stories about first millions or hundreds of millions of customers, and then break those stories down based on demographics and behaviors to tens of thousands, down all the way to single individuals that you can interact with.
Interesting. So I think when you were discussing this, I think that thing that came to my mind was B2B and B2C. So customer journey analytics for something like B2B and something like totally wildly different with total different cycles. How would you address that? Like, do you or you just say I'll be just maestro of B2C interaction, or do you see like from the journey it doesn't matter, it's the same? Like, what are some of your thoughts in that direction?
Yeah, it's a great question, and what we're seeing is that journeys are important to both B2B and B2C, and the value depends on things that aren't necessarily obvious. So some people, the first question that they ask, and it's a completely valid question, is how many customers do you need to make journey analytics worth it, or how many prospects do you need, right? And it turns out that, like a lot of answers in this domain, it's nuanced, and you need enough to be statistically meaningful. And I'm going to duck because my analytics team is going to shout at me for trying to put this topic. But as it turns out, we have customers with single-digit thousands of customers or prospects that can make very great use of the product in their particular domain, especially since, in the case of B2B now, a lot of the process of buying, the sort of traditional funnel is dead, right? People in the B2B space, companies in the B2B space, first of all, you're dealing with companies, and hence all the account-based marketing. So there are multiple journeys that correspond to in journey analytics. We have to correspond to the journey of the individual as well as the journey of the
interesting,
right? And also, more of that journey than ever today takes place without you, the enterprise, knowing who those people are, actually knowing identities, right? Because there's so much education that goes on before they actually make contact, right? There's so much awareness, education, and research that these people and companies are doing before they, to winnow down not only what they think they need for their organizations, but also who they're going to, which companies they're going to be part of the race to get their business. So, journey analytics is critically important in the B2B space to understand what's happening to your anonymous prospects. Where are they in their journeys, and influencing those journeys. And you might say, well, how do you do that? Well, it's important that you know where people are originating from, that you know how they're interacting with the information that you disseminate into the market. It's not necessarily critical that you know their actual personal identifiable information at that point. And so understanding who the account is, who the company is, there are really clever ways to get that, and understand and grouping that organization into an account to be able to understand where they are in that journey and what's working for them and what their interests are. All that can be done before they've fully revealed themselves to you. So a lot of people think the B2B market is not a great market for it, but that's proving not to be the case.
Interesting.
And B2C market is first of all, we're talking about it like there are two markets. There are obviously dozens and dozens of sub-markets in there, and very different challenges if you're a telecom operator with tens of millions of customers, where your biggest challenge is really improving that customer experience, versus maybe a retailer or a CPG brand that's really trying to develop a very close relationship, understand your customer better, because you feel like you're being commoditized in a market of many choices. But suffice to say, in the B2C world, it's almost a truth we hold self-evident, right? If you've got 1 million customers or 100 million customers, you really that's something that's largely immune to human analysis. You really need analytics, and you need advanced machine learning to be able to cope with that problem.
Interesting. So I think one thing that I was discussing with some of the guys at least a couple of years back. Can you overdo this? Like, can you overdo customer journey analytics? Like, can you overdo customer experience, or like, is there any high bar where you say, okay, like it's like your annoying aunt, right, who just always take care of you whether you want it or not? Like, do you think there's something like overdoing customer analytics, or that's very hard that you don't have to think about the direction?
It's an interesting question. I think that'll be a great conversation to have in 2025. But coming from it, let me answer that differently, slightly different perspective. We have a lot of customers who actually do something called journey mapping, and journey mapping is something that marketers and agencies have been doing for many years, and it's really, as we introduce a new product, as we build a new company, or a new service, what is that journey that we want to create for our customers? Right? And typically we might have broken that down by persona. So we might have done a little ethnographic research and through interviews, through observation, and we started to piece together these journeys. If we're really rigorous, then we do a lot of that research and we collect it. If we're not so research oriented, then we might just be shooting from the gut, right? But in any event, we create these journeys, which might be broken down by personas, and then we build our whole process around those journeys. And we think a lot about what customers are thinking at any point in that journey, what they're feeling, and what they're doing, and how do the processes that we put together correspond to those things. That is a broad practice area that has become more defined, and there are more people doing it than ever now. That's a few years ahead of journey analytics. That's journey mapping.
Interesting.
But usually, what happens at the conclusion of that journey mapping process is that journey map, with increasing velocity, starts to collect dust, and then becomes largely irrelevant in the operating framework. And
interesting.
Where we're getting a lot of traction is we don't compete with journey mapping. We augment it, right? Journey analytics. So journey mapping, this is what we want. This is the ideal. Journey analytics says, this is what's actually happening, right? So during that initial process, you've defined what matters. And really, at each stage of the evolution. And really, there are implied metrics in there. Journey analytics, you quickly create those metrics. You tie them back, and this is what closes the loop. This is your feedback loop. So for companies that are doing journey mapping, journey analytics has become that quantitative feedback that they never had, which creates much more value in the initial journey mapping process, and much more information for the people that built it, but importantly, the people that depend on it. So that's
interesting.
So I don't think
interesting.
I don't think that there's not too much journey analytics going on.
So okay, so I think so now for a moment let's take the Pointillist piece out, right? So let's see
Yeah.
a very early startup, probably going to kick off, getting some customers. How can they build a customer journey map without any tool? And like, what are some of your insights? If I'm a business and I'm sort of I have some sporadic or some interactions, how can I sort of prep myself in a direction of where probably this would be relevant by the time when I'm reaching at a level where I can need Pointillist?
Yeah,
What are some
well,
of the thoughts?
you said journey map, but I want to make sure that we distinguish it. So, there are a lot of tools on the market to help build a journey map, and there are a lot of sort of best practices in that area. It's something that we help with, but a lot of our customers do that. So, but, that's part of the designing the process. For a startup, that's usually going to be a much more agile process. You're typically not going to be bringing an agency in and maybe probably not a lot of consultants, but you're probably building your product, introducing it to the market. And really what you want to do is you want to not only look at the metrics at the end, how much are people buying, how much people visiting, but you want to be able to understand why they're doing things along that journey. Why are they, if it's a software product, for example, how are they using that product? Where are the problems? Where's the friction, right? During the acquisition process, during the usage of the product, maybe during the customer support process, right? So you can instrument. What Journey Analytics allows you to do is instrument all of those things really quickly, right? So if I'm a startup, don't talk to me about waiting weeks, right? I need to do something that's really quick. I need to do something for under $10,000, and it better be really valuable and quick for me to do that. So whoever you talk to for that kind of thing, and whoever you talk to, I'm not telling startups anything they don't know. That's the reality of it. And you have to provide value to justify any cost, and more importantly, diversion of their energy, right? Because maybe the most dear resource in a startup is focus and energy, right? Even more so than cash, although that might be hard to believe.
Right.
So you need to be able to find someone that's going to give you that value very quickly. And depending upon the nature of your startup, as soon as you get to either journeys that are non-trivial, right? If I sell one widget and there's only one way to buy it, and it's only on the web, then you probably don't need a journey analytics platform. But if I sell a few things, or if I have a mobile app and a web interface, and I also have a support, maybe a chat and a web support, a few different channels, so there are multiple journeys. There's the acquisition journey, there's the product usage journey, there's the return visit journey, there's the abandonment journey. All these things that startups frequently do from the gut. If they can do it more quantitatively, very quickly, and at a very reasonable price, those are the kinds of things that are going to get startups to move.
Interesting. So I think one definitely area that I want your thoughts on is, when is the right time when a business should start say, okay, it's bigger than I expected, and maybe I should start looking for a solution. What is that pivotal stage that you think that where businesses say, okay, maybe I need something like Pointillist, or I need some solution that help me understand, sketch this thing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it varies by like we talked about. There are a number of different dimensions to that. But I would say this, some of the criteria that I just spoke about in terms of what your customer journey or touch points look like. You have to have a critical mass of information available. So, I hesitate to put a number on it, but it's going to be kind of at least thousands of prospects, and as soon as you feel like you have thousands of prospects or tens of thousands of prospects and customers, and you don't know why they're behaving a certain way. You don't know why people are dropping out. You don't understand really the impact of your customer support or how well your self-help mechanisms are working with customers. Is my call center provider creating problems for my renewals, right? Subscriptions are a key area for this. As soon as you feel like you don't understand your customer in material areas, that's the time you want to start looking at a journey analytics platform. And again, only if they meet your criteria for cost and speed of insight.
Interesting. So I think definitely a good piece of advice. So if you're seeing some certain customer behavior and you want to understand what's the impact of that behavior to your sale or to your transaction, that's a good place to engage. I think that's good to share that. So now let's talk about one of the best company that, or the hallmark of, like, they are doing customer journey analytics the best in the industry. So do you have any such company in mind?
So I'll just pick up some of our customers. I'll use one. Customer of ours is Canadian Red Cross. Those guys are, they've always been a leader in their space. It's from a charitable donation perspective, it's a huge market over the last few years for them, just because they've suffered through, in Canada, they've suffered through a lot of devastating wildfires. And the country has really rallied around and created a huge momentum in terms of giving to that organization. Those guys are not only great people, but they're highly quantitative in their approach to how they understand their relationship with their donors. And they embrace them so many ways, through so many different channels, face-to-face, community meetings, obviously all the usual channels of web and mobile. And building those relationships, for them, many of which are lifetime relationships, right? That's the goal, is to build lifetime relationships and trust and inspiration, right? This is a market that's unique in some ways. These guys are using journeys to, really across every aspect of those customer relationships, to optimize quantitative outcomes, from the very front end of bringing new members into their organization, to converting members to not only participants but lifetime donors, and that journey is not goal is not sufficiently met by just understanding demographics. And so knowing when and how to communicate with people, under what circumstances, is critical to them, and they're some of the best at it.
Interesting. So let's talk about some of the customers who engage with you, or any customer engaging with customer analytics journey platform. So typically, like, who are those folks? So like, by this time when someone think about getting contacting Pointillist or any such company, like, they already have some capability in house. They already have, like, what are some of the, if you can describe the client team or sort of the vendor or sort of the team that pretty much can contact you, what's the nature and the layout of that team, if you can shed some light on that?
Yeah. No, that's a hugely important question, and it's it's in flux, and I think it's going to be in flux for many years, right? There's this sort of whole secular trend now, going from brand focused marketing and sort of gut level decision making to quantitative marketing, digital, getting all your digital data, all your offline data together, to be able to act on it in a very quantitative way. So this motion from traditional marketing to digital marketing and quantitative marketing, and the same in sort of customer experience and analytics space. So it varies widely in the maturity of different industry groups, different industries and sectors, and different organizations varies widely as well. So even today, a lot of companies want to do this, but don't have the right cultural fit, or necessarily the right skill set to do it internally. So as easy as a product like Pointillist makes it to be able to get the data together and act on it, it's still a whole way of thinking about your customer, right? It's thinking quantitatively. So our best customers not only want to engage quantitatively, but have some skills internally. Usually those are digital marketers, customer experience teams, analytics teams, or business intelligence teams that are looking for more productive ways to get at information faster. Those are all sort of core candidates for us. For a lot of companies that don't have those capabilities, we go to market through partners. So we have some large global partners like Bain Consulting, Omnicom, UST Global, Capgemini, among others, that we go to, because part of this is for large organizations, these are big strategic questions. They have many divisions, many complications. Many have gone through a slew of acquisitions over the last few years. All these things do require some thought, and a lot of times, where do we start? What are the key areas that we focus on? And a lot of times it's helpful to have partners that can help walk you through some of that process. So, historically, a lot of the analytics thinking and quantitative thinking around customer experience and customer journeys has been outsourced to agencies and consultants. So that's a really important avenue to customers for us.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think we are almost at the tail end of our this journey. So thank you, Ron, for spending time with our community and discussing customer journey analytics and what that really means. And I think some of the key insights that I captured from the interaction was understand the journey, understand the relationship between the customer, how it's going, and if you can't quantify it, then probably you need some solution or some way to map the journey, and so you can understand the customer behavior, kind of predict in that manner. So thank you so much. And I think before we leave, do you have any closing remark for our audience? Any closing thought that comes to your mind, who's actually thinking of creating a customer journey and roadmap or analytics or strategy within their company? What are like 2, 3, or 4 steps that they could do that you could sort of give them some insights on?
I guess advice is often worth what you pay for it, but I would say this: be agile, be cheap, and look for early wins that you have the opportunity to progressively prove themselves. So regardless of the technology, regardless of the approach, don't try to attack it like a big traditional waterfall process would be my advice. Those are to the extent that anybody that's been on one of those projects knows they're very challenging. They do succeed on occasion, but they require an incredible amount of forethought and resilience. And in my view, that's what our job is, and other companies in our space, is to make it available in a practical way for companies that need to do this quickly. So I would say, identify the key opportunities, attack them with take small bites and take an agile and iterative approach to it.
Okay, so I think that concludes. Thank you so much, Ron. Couldn't have said any better. And again, I do appreciate you helping even Boston community from the personal point of view to sort of get some good entrepreneur out. And I think I do appreciate what Pointillist is doing for customer journey analytics world, and love to have you back at some point in our and in future, discussing how things have shaped up and sharing more insights that our sort of audience could pick from you. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, I would love to do that, Vishal. In conclusion, a big shout out to you guys. I love what you're doing. I love the opportunity to come here and talk to you about it. Always happy to co-participate and sponsor things that you're involved in. Depending upon if your audience finds this topic interesting or not, there's a whole meaty side of this on the predictive analytics and machine learning side that other members of my team could probably do. I know they could do much better service than I would. So that's another opportunity as well. But thanks again. Really loved it.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on a